Hello, everybody.
Howdy. How's everybody doing? Awesome.
All right. My name is Anton Fajardo. I'm with PricewaterhouseCoopers. 10 months ago, we were approached by AT&T, and they asked us to build this platform to help them get to AWS, launch a product in the AWS marketplace, and also help them monitor cloud loads. This is actually a pretty amazing story because an organization usually takes about 2 years to bring a product to market. We're 10 months into it, and we're basically onboarding our first client, and we're targeting a product launch in January. So, Alex, why don't you talk a little about the platform itself?
Absolutely. So, some quick history on the background of Threat Manager. AT&T, as a managed security provider, actually has some unique advantages in the marketplace. And kind of approaching this opportunity with Anton and PwC, we took a step back and we said, what are some of the competitive advantages that we have as a company? One of which is the data visibility. As probably all of you know, AT&T is a network provider and a leader in the connectivity space. But what comes with that is a lot of data visibility as well. So to be specific, we see hundreds of petabytes of data across our network every day. What comes along with that massive amount of information is our ability to identify new and emerging threats across that network, and then have the opportunity to apply that intelligence on behalf of a customer to actually remediate any kind of known and unknown threats across their network. So last year, we actually launched the service Threat Manager in a traditional prem-based environment, which proved to be very successful. One of the things that we identified that was an opportunity, again with PwC, was moving that opportunity into the cloud. So one of the more untapped spaces that we've seen in this particular part of the market is an end-to-end managed service for cyber to actually remediate on behalf of customers. So in doing so, moving that traditional prem-based service into the AWS, not only from an infrastructure perspective, but also having the ability to monitor and react to threats across customers' workloads in AWS. So that's a little background on that side of the house.
So, Alex, can you talk a little bit more about the compliance concerns that come with the data loads?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the kind of staying and growing concerns that we see on behalf of our customers is a variety of different compliance concerns, whether it's PCI, HIPAA, FINRA, whatever the compliance needs are on behalf of a customer, whatever their industry they're in, is continuing to be a staying concern. And so what we're able to do in this space, again, using AWS, is scale that operation to actually have that visibility, not only domestically, but also internationally. So one of the things on the emerging horizon here we see is the end of May of next year, you see GDPR in Europe. So there's some very heavy restrictions that are going to be changing the landscape of what data is available, what can be shared with security companies and just generally IT companies in the European Union. So in doing that, moving our infrastructure and identifying workloads in AWS is allowing us to be on the forefront to catch that GDPR ball.
Yeah, so two things here. One is the creation of a new product. The second thing is the migration of a platform from on-prem bare metal to the cloud. So let's get to the technology itself. We actually put this together a month and a half ago, and today this looks nothing like we're actually putting out to market. And my first instinct was actually to change this and update the diagram, but then I said, why? The whole point is the flexibility that we get with AWS. So when we first ventured to start building this platform, we started with just basically building a data collector that you see on the right-hand side, or the left-hand side of yours, and then sending data to the on-prem infrastructure that actually does the log analytics on bare metal for AT&T. Right away we noticed, or we realized, that we cannot collect log data and analyze log data for an elastic infrastructure with a static bare metal traditional infrastructure. So we need to have that elasticity on the analytics engine that we get in the cloud to be able to monitor elastic infrastructure. True story, a couple of years ago, I was working on this website for a major retailer, and on the first day of the launch, they actually bought a $10 million takeover Yahoo, and they never let anybody know. Not the infrastructure team, much less the CISO team. So imagine what happens if we try to absorb log data for something like this, where somebody just decided to run a promotion and send a bunch of traffic to a platform that was not meant for it. So when we started looking at the architecture itself, obviously we want to nerd out, we want to build it with the latest and greatest. So the first pass we did for the architecture was geared towards the latest and greatest. So we nerded out, we worked with AWS, built the best practices into it. Then the second round we did it was with a cost-based perspective. So once we created the architecture, looked at the volumes, calculated the cost to run the platform, the hosting cost projections, and looked at also the projections that we had, the business cases, to figure out what operational expenses will be absorbed by AT&T the next few months. Did that. Third round of architectural reviews was based on operations. How do we actually operate and scale this? How do we make sure that operational doesn't become a weight on AT&T and the platform doesn't get dropped because it's just too costly to operate? So we optimize for operation and provisioning. Alex, do you want to talk a little about how the cost-based analysis helps you with your business case and be able to get funding?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll talk about two things. One is the cost basis and the implication, but also the corresponding implication from a timing perspective. Yeah. So with large enterprises, a lot of the times you have a little bit longer cycle times when it comes to emerging and developing new technologies. As Anton already indicated, when we took this conscientious change in course from an architecture perspective so late in the game, typically we see that as a big challenge. So traditionally you kind of see you'd have to go back to the well and kind of identify here's the impacts to the business case, rework it, resubmit things, and move back from there, which can sometimes take a little bit longer time than you would see, perhaps than you would expect. So that's one component. The other is the timing implication from an actual implementation perspective. So Anton already talked about earlier having the ability to move brand new technology, especially an entire platform, rapidly into AWS in such a short amount of time. That's less than a year. For a large enterprise company, that's a pretty quick amount of time, especially on the heels of the MVP of that platform being launched so recently. So typically you'd see a change in architecture cause probably a significant amount of delay up to perhaps a half a year. With this type of agile perspective, and I say that not only in the developmental sense of the word from an agile development methodology, but I also mean from a cultural perspective and making sure that everybody's bought into understanding exactly the fact that as the landscape changes, we need to make sure that we're remaining flexible in our approach to making sure that we're hitting the mark as the industry continues to change and the demands do too.
Yeah, so one anecdote about this diagram is that pretty much your right-hand side of the diagram got blown away a month ago as we're actually conducting a controlled introduction of this platform into the market. So we basically scrapped all that and we put Elasticsearch into it. In a traditional environment, a month away from a launch, introducing a technology like Elasticsearch, all the hardware that's required, going back to the business stakeholders and asking for more money, getting buttons from 3 or 4 different factories of who's going to operate, who's going to support it, who's going to fine-tune it, the integration points into it, it's impossible. And here we are a month into it, and we're able to completely change the architecture and not have to worry about scalability. Right. So how do we get this done? It's easier said than done, right? So we're launching a product, there's a lot of things that are involved in it. There's marketing, there's operations, there's sales, enablement. How do we actually collect cash? For a company like AT&T who's not used to selling products in the marketplace this way, it's a brand new way of selling. So imagine what it actually takes to integrate into billing systems and change processes within it. How do we actually deliver a piece of software that is to specs of what the actual product team actually wants? It's very, very hard, right? So the way we did this, we have a proprietary methodology at PwC called BXT. BXT is really an evolution of design thinking. I'm pretty sure everybody has gone through the growing pains of actually trying to launch something or build something with design thinking. And it's beautiful, it's amazing, right? It changes the way you actually think about products, how you develop, how you design, how the technology enables that design. But a lot of times it fails because we don't think about the business aspect of it. I can, the number of times I've been in a position where I've actually spent millions of dollars in my previous lifetime in an agency, building out a platform or a product, and we launch it, and within the first month it gets scrapped because they never thought about maintenance, operations, how you can actually input data into data management. So it's only a beautiful idea, it looks beautiful, the technology is there, but who's going to operate it? Does it make business sense? Is it going to bring the revenue that you actually need for your companies? Are you going to hit the revenue targets they actually need? So it's extremely important that business is also integrated into design thinking, and this is what we call BXT. And again, it's easier said than done. It's hard enough we're integrating design with technology. Now, if you overlay on top of that business, it becomes even harder. And in this specific case, we had to also overlay cybersecurity on top of all these three angles. So if you think about it, cybersecurity, there's an experience aspect to it because it's a cybersecurity platform. There's a technology aspect to it for cybersecurity, not only from the implementation and securing our platform, but also from the product that's being offered. And then on the business side, how do you figure out into what kind of white space you want to move as a product and you want to fill to be able to compete with this room that you see with companies that are offering something similar, and what's your competitive advantage to be able to win in the marketplace? So again, easier said than done. Alex, anything you want to add to BXT?
Yeah, I'd highlight again that it's really an evolution of design thinking. So I think a lot of folks from a product background kind of understand design thinking and making sure that you're hitting the mark from a usability and design perspective, but also making sure the business is being cared for as well. And I think that's really articulated pretty well with that BXT methodology, but making sure that you have the end in mind the entire time, especially as requirements and the landscape just changes in general, that's a big deal. And in fact, as a result of that, I think the next slide that you're going to talk about here is kind of understanding how to move very rapidly in that type of environment to a proof of concept and then ultimately deliver to controlled introduction as well as a generally available product, right?
Yep, so the premise here is how do you build something very quickly so you can prove your point? For example, right now we're 10 months into this project. We could have very well failed this project in month 2, month 3, and saved everybody a lot of time and also be able to redirect the intellect capital to other projects.
Which is a big thing. I kind of want to emphasize what he just said there too. So there's really two implications with that comment. The first of which is the financial implication. So if you're going to burn something and because it's not hitting the mark, making sure that you're doing it in a quick fashion to making sure that you're not throwing good money after bad. That's one big one. But also the intellectual capital and making sure that all of our teams are working on the highest and most valuable piece of work possible. So that's making sure that you have the ability to do those quick proof of concepts and then obviously fail fast if that is the case, but obviously in this particular situation proved to be very fruitful, and I'll let you kind of explain where we are from a CI perspective.
So when we talk about BXT, the key here is this bow tie in the middle. Is you cannot put a creative, a technologist, and a business person in the same room without them getting into a cat fight. They have very different perspectives.
Never
they
happens.
Want very different things. They have different goals. They measure different ways. So you got to get them somehow thinking about what they were trying to actually build and deliver. But they're stuck a little bit separate. And then as they get more familiar, you start iterating very quickly. In this case, it was 5 weeks, and start converging and collaborating to the point where you get to the hypothesis where all three tracks, business, experience, and technology, in this case also cyber, converge and they have the hypothesis of what they're actually trying to build. And then they start separating and start building the tracks, and you get to a point where you actually start building a POC. Once you build a POC, it doesn't have to be the real technology, but you start experimenting with the technology itself. You start experimenting with the business concept. You start experimenting with experience, testing the experience with actual usability testing, make sure that what you end up building makes sense for the end user. At that point, you build a POC. It could be a clickable prototype. On the technology side, understanding the technology implications, the cost perspective, that's where you actually get the cost basis of your platform, your projections of what you actually going to cost to run down the road. But within the first 20 weeks, you can actually maybe invest this random number. It could be a $20 million project end-to-end. In this case, you can invest $2 million by the POC phase, and you realize this is completely unoperatable. This doesn't make any business sense. But guess what? In 20 weeks, you just scrap the idea, you moved on. Alex?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the cost implications and the cost savings by operating in that model is huge. It's very huge. So from my perspective, if you walk away from my part of the presentation with 3 key pieces of information, one of which is we keep coming back to highlighting the business need. What's the value in the business? What are you going to do to drive value in the marketplace? Kind of being your first and primary focus. The second of which is culture. Culture is key. So making sure that you have the ability to have everybody on board, whether there's constructive discourse regardless of the conversation, that it's going towards the right thing. And the third thing is really having the ability to succeed quickly and fail fast, and walking back from those failures and saying, you know what, this is a fantastic thing, and it's celebrated as opposed to something that you could be severely chastised for. So those are kind of the 3 big pieces from my perspective.
Yep. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, y'all.